is a Tracking the Tropics update with the certified most accurate weather team at First Coast News.
Tropical storm Oscar continues to move over eastern Cuba today, this after making landfall as a Category 1 hurricane on Sunday afternoon in eastern Cuba, just towards the north of Guantanamo Bay. I'm meteorologist Robert Speta. I want to break down this storm system, where it's impacting right now and where it's headed, and also let you know that at least at this time, we are not expecting any impacts from any tropical systems, including Oscar here across the southeastern United States, including across the First Coast. Now, there could be some indirect impacts, including large swells and dangerous rip currents along the east coast of Florida, and I'll get to that in just a few moments. But let's talk about the storm system at this time. And currently it is located right over eastern Cuba. In fact, you can see based on the satellite imagery here, actually starting to get a bit of a shear working in on this as we expected. That is going to weaken this, and the reason why we're anticipating this move towards the north and east. So with that weakening, winds are down to 40 miles per hour sustained in that center of circulation. At its peak, it was around 80 miles per hour, with that pressure now at 1,001 millibars. So overall, conditions are improving across eastern areas of Cuba. But I do want to mention the fact that you can see here on satellite imagery how this intensified pretty quickly as it neared landfall, going from a low chance of tropical development all the way up to a hurricane in the course of about 12 hours. This was kind of a surprise, but not a terrible surprise in the general scope of things, because there are very warm sea surface temperatures out here across the Atlantic. And at the beginning of hurricane season, we noted that there could be some storm systems that would rapidly intensify. We've seen that with Helene, we've seen that again with Milton, and now with this storm system, we've seen this go from pretty much a few areas of cloud cover with a low chance of development, and it moved over in an area that was very warm with those waters, allowing it to get its act together very quickly and strengthen before coming on shore along eastern areas of that country. And that after it even moved over the Turks and Caicos and eastern areas of the Bahamas. And actually, you just see right here what I'm talking about, those sea surface temperatures. This is not normal for late October. Temperatures out there into the eastern Caribbean into the mid to high 80s. So I know there's a lot of conspiracy theories floating around out there about people saying the government is controlling this. Guys, let's talk about the facts here. The reality is these are very warm, record-breaking sea surface temperatures fueling up these storm systems and allowing them to get their act together and intensify very quickly. So where is this storm going at this time? Well, let's take a look actually at the track here. From the National Hurricane Center as of 11 a.m., winds there at 40 miles per hour. It's moving off towards the west-northwest, and then it's going to move over the Bahamas, staying towards the southeast of Nassau. But here's the deal. As it moves over those waters, it's going to stay at a weaker tropical storm, mainly because of that shear that is going to be interacting with it. So even though it gets back over those warmer waters, it is going to start to see the jet stream almost dip down and steer this along. And that's also the reason why I anticipate to stay well offshore. Now, with that said, we do have these tropical storm warnings still in place all across Cuba, and that includes for our military friends out of the United States. Here in Jacksonville, we have a lot of military, especially Navy friends out there in Guantanamo Bay. They are under tropical storm warnings at this time, but I haven't seen any reports of significant conditions. The big thing there has just been the heavy rainfall from this storm system. Now, as it turns towards the north, that could change a bit as we go over towards the Turks and Caicos. As it steers along, we could start to see those winds pick back up to about that 40 to 45 mile per hour threshold. Now, I do want to mention one thing, the reason why we have all this heavy rainfall, and I think this graphic really shows pretty well those mountains across eastern Cuba. The highest point rate in here is about 6,000 feet. Now, you compare that with Florida, where it's predominantly just a few feet above sea level. There's not a lot of friction to kind of rip these storm systems apart. That is the case here with eastern Cuba. And not only ripping it apart, but think of a sponge that is soaked in water. If you just squeeze it, all of that comes right out. That is basically the same thing we're seeing in the atmosphere out here across eastern portions of the island due to those mountains squeezing out this tropical system like a sponge. And the reason why, we've already seen heavy rainfall, and overall we could see some areas seeing over 15 inches of total precipitation. That on top of the fact that we've already had several days of infrastructure power outages across the country. So they're seeing serious impacts from that, and then you just kind of kick them while they're down, I suppose, with this tropical system bringing that heavy rain and those windy conditions causing the additional impacts for our friends out here. So something I want to continue to monitor as we go ahead over the next few days, but eventually this is going to turn towards the north and move out here across the eastern Bahamas. Why is it going to be going on that track? That's the big question. A lot of people are saying, how can you be so confident this is not going to come towards Florida? This year, we've had multiple systems head out here towards the Gulf Coast. This is why. This front towards our south. The reason why across the southeast, it's very autumnal, very cool, clear skies for the most part. It's because of high pressure. Tropical systems do not want to run uphill. They're like a boat flowing downriver. They're not going to float up a mountain river, they're going to flow down it. And that's the case with this. Our tropical system is going to hit that stationary boundary, the lowest pressure in the region, and kick off towards northeast while high pressure continues to linger and settle over the southeast. And then it will be being reinforced by another cold front reinforcing that high pressure by midweek. So in short, I'm not anticipating this to move towards the north and west based on that, as well as the upper level jet stream, which is going to steer this along and increase that shear. This right here is showing you the 500 millibar upper level winds. And that's basically about 20 to 25,000 feet above our heads. Those winds are exceptionally strong, and that's basically going to help blow this along and almost blow out like a candle and push the tops over on this storm system, allowing it to weaken as it kicks it off here towards the north and east. So I know it was a hurricane, but the thing is, it is going to continue to weaken. Now, indirect impacts across the United States. Well, we could be seeing some large waves. As this interacts with that stationary boundary and that high pressure ridge towards the north, it is going to be kicking up these swells. Even at this time, across the Atlantic, we have those buoys out there at about 9 feet just offshore of Florida. Those waves are coming onshore, increasing rip currents, as well as tidal flooding in some areas across the first coast, including the St. Johns River, where there are tidal and coastal flood warnings in place at this time due to those water levels continuing to kick up as those winds push onshore due to the indirect impact from this with that low towards the south, high pressure towards the north, and you get that tight pressure gradient with those winds coming onshore. Now, I've seen in the past, people have asked, or people have stated that it's unusual for a storm to go from west to east. And I'm laughing a little bit at that. I know people, you're very curious about the atmosphere. But the reality is it's normal to see a storm system take a track from west to east, like we've seen with Milton and we're seeing with this. This is your average climate for the month of October and generally where these storm systems go. And it feels like this is exactly what's happening. It starts around Cuba, and then they shift off towards the north as they get picked up by jet streams, kind of pulling them along with these upper level troughs. So climatology would dictate this type of track that we're seeing in our forecast as well. Remember, Nadine also made landfall this past weekend across Belize. That storm system is no longer occurring whatsoever, while Oscar, that's the one we're currently tracking, and if we get another named storm, it would be called Patty. Now, the fact is, we could see another named storm. Hurricane season doesn't end to the end of November, so may not be seeing one right now, but eventually it could be named, and something we're going to continue to monitor with you here at First Coast News and at firstcoastnews.com at our Hurricane Central. Just a few questions a few of you have had here about the impacts from this storm system. I did read one about conditions at Guantanamo Bay. As I mentioned earlier, they did see some heavy rainfall. I didn't see winds terribly high out there, mainly protected by the mountains as those winds came in from the north. And could you see impacts in South Florida from this storm, especially those people that are still recovering after Hurricane Milton? As I mentioned, the big thing is going to be those waves and that risk of rip currents along coastal areas. But remember, during Milton, we saw tornadoes and things like that. Nothing like that. High pressure, easterly winds, and just maybe some stratocumulus kicking on by, but no impacts from this storm system across that area. I'm meteorologist Robert Speta. Andrew, do we have any questions or anything that have come in? All right, so yeah, I think that answers a couple of your questions here, but if you have any, you can comment on this page and I'll try my best to answer for you. As always, thanks for watching and make sure you check out firstcoastnews.com for more information.